Waiter insulted Big Shaq in a luxury restaurant. Not knowing he owns the restaurant, Shaquille O'Neal had every reason to enjoy a relaxed evening out. Yet on this particular night, he was determined to keep things low-key. Dressed in a simple sweatshirt and loose-fitting jeans, he entered Mirage, a renowned high-end restaurant nestled in the gleaming heart of downtown Los Angeles. At first glance, nothing about his attire screamed celebrity. In fact, many people might not immediately recognize the towering man if they only paid attention to his casual clothes, though his imposing height was a clue. The decor of Mirage was top-notch: velvet booths, ambient lighting reflecting off mirrored walls, and waiters in pressed black and white uniforms gliding about. The clientele for the evening was mostly dressed in elegant designer suits and dresses, their voices hushed as they sipped from crystal glasses. Over in a corner, a pianist played soft jazz that merged seamlessly with the low murmur of conversation. Upon stepping into the reception area, Shaquille met the eyes of Jason, a tall, slick-haired waiter assigned to seat new arrivals. Jason's training had taught him to greet every patron politely, but a hint of distaste flickered across his face as he took in Shaq's laid-back attire. Something about the man's baggy clothes and worn sneakers rubbed Jason the wrong way. His lips curled into a half-smirk. "Good evening," Jason said, his voice edged with forced politeness. "Welcome to Mirage. May I help you?" Shaquille offered a friendly smile. "Yeah, I'd like a table. Just me tonight," he replied in a casual tone. The waiter's gaze traveled from Shaq's well-worn sweatshirt and sneakers, then flicked up to his face. "We're quite full this evening," he said, sniffing, "and we usually require reservations." "Got it," Shaquille said, "but I was hoping you might have an open seat, even if it's not in the main area." Jason hesitated a beat, scanning a computerized list behind the front podium. He spotted empty tables on his screen. Mirage wasn't at capacity yet. Nevertheless, he turned back with a thin smile. "We do have one seat left," he gestured dismissively toward a cramped corner near the kitchen doors. "I suppose you can sit there." Shaquille was unfazed by Jason's condescension. "That'll work," he said warmly. Jason led him through the restaurant, breezing past plush booths and comfortable tables with fine linen. He guided Shaq to a small, wobbling table right next to the bustling kitchen. Pots clanged behind the door, and every so often a waiter burst through carrying trays. It was undoubtedly the least appealing spot in Mirage. The moment Shaquille lowered his large frame onto the dainty chair, Jason dropped a menu onto the table with an audible thud. "We have some top-tier items," the waiter commented with false sweetness. "I'll give you a moment to see if anything suits your tastes." Then, as though this new customer was hardly worth more of his time, Jason spun on his heel. At first, no one else in the restaurant seemed to notice. Couples continued murmuring over candlelight, and the faint jazz notes drifted across the space. Yet a couple of other staff, including the hostess, caught the tension in Jason's posture as he whisked past. They exchanged puzzled glances. Shaquille opened the leather-bound menu, skimming the premium steak cuts and exotic seafood priced in the hundreds. It looked enticing, yet he sensed an underlying tension from Jason, who seemed determined to belittle him. This kind of reception wasn't new. Shaq was used to dealing with people who saw only a tall man in relaxed clothes and made assumptions. When Jason returned, he stood with arms crossed. "Have you decided?" he asked, sarcasm barely masked. "We specialize in top-dollar Wagyu, but maybe you'd prefer chicken strips, something a little more modest in price." Shaq blinked, amused by the jab. "Actually," he said, tapping a finger on the Wagyu listing, "I'll take the Wagyu fillet, medium rare, and your best red wine, if you don't mind." The waiter's eyes narrowed. "Wagyu fillet is $290. Just making sure we're on the same page." "Yes, we are," Shaq said, voice unruffled. "You do accept credit cards, right?" Jason forced a tight smile. "Of course, sir. One moment." He scribbled the order, pivoting sharply to deliver the news to the kitchen. After placing the order, Jason returned to lean over the table. "I must inform you, sir, that we have a standard of dining etiquette here, dress codes, behavior guidelines. We expect a certain standard." Sometimes, people who aren't used to these prices are, well, shocked by the final bill. Shaq took a sip of water. I appreciate the heads up, but I'll be all right. At a nearby table, two elderly patrons exchanged glances. They'd noticed the tension in Jason's voice and the calm dignity of the big man in the corner. The older woman shook her head, whispering, "That waiter's so rude. That poor man." Her companion nodded quietly, outraged. "He's not poor in spirit, though. Look at how gracious he is." Soon, Shaq's steak arrived, plated with meticulous detail. Jason placed it on the table with a flourish. "Enjoy," he sneered, stepping back to watch for any sign of intimidation. Shaq took a single bite, his eyes lighting up. "Compliments to the chef," he added softly. Jason's face twitched. "That'll be $290 well spent, I guess," he muttered, then marched away to greet a well-dressed couple at the door. Throwing Shaquille one last scornful look, Shaq ate slowly, savoring the steak. He'd never let arrogant staff ruin a good meal. In the hushed background, he caught the soft hush of unsettled diners. A few people were noticing the mismatch, a waiter's haughty attitude versus this gentle giant's calm courtesy. After finishing, Shaq signaled for the check. Jason arrived, making a dramatic show of flipping open a small black folder. "Let's see if we can settle this," he said, sliding it across the table. Shaq peeked inside, verifying the charge. Without hesitation, he slipped out a credit card. Jason's brow furrowed. Clearly, he'd expected some meltdown. Instead, the man handed over his card calmly. "Thank you," Shaq said. Jason retreated to the register, a hint of confusion creeping into his eyes. Usually, if he'd berated a lowly dressed guest, they'd either fled or fumed. This one was paying with zero protest. In the corner of the restaurant, two men in suits stepped inside. Scanning for someone, they spotted Shaq's broad shoulders, nodded, and approached quietly. Jason returned with the card, about to lay it down when one of the men in suits addressed him. "Excuse me, Jason, correct?" The waiter jerked at hearing his name from someone he didn't recognize. Yeah." The man gave a polite but firm nod. "Thank you. We're from the restaurant's executive board. Is everything all right here?" Jason stammered, perplexed. "Ah, yes. Of course. Everything's fine." Shaquille rose from his seat, the black folder with the check in hand. He turned to the two men. "Good to see you guys," he said warmly. They greeted him with professional respect. "Sir, we didn't realize you'd be here tonight." A hush fell across the dining area. Nearby diners noticed the sudden shift in tone. Jason froze, glancing from Shaquille to the men in suits, his composure cracking. "Sir," he repeated. "Wait, are you implying?" One of the suited men cut in, addressing the entire room. "Allow us to clarify. Mr. O'Neill here is not just a guest. He's part owner of Mirage." A stunned murmur swept through the tables. The same hush overcame the staff. Jason's eyes went wide, color draining from his face. He sputtered, but he didn't say anything. He just... Shaq offered a mild shrug, setting the black folder aside. "I prefer to enjoy my meals without a big scene, but you made your feelings clear from the start." The manager, alerted by the commotion, rushed over. His eyes widened at seeing Shaquille O'Neal. "Mr. O'Neill, I had no idea you'd be visiting. We're honored. Please, let us know if everything was satisfactory." Shaq folded his arms, his expression calm but firm. "I appreciate the greeting now, but your staff's behavior is a concern. This gentleman, Jason, singled me out based on appearance. Spent the evening mocking me. We can't have that in a place meant to welcome everyone." Jason's mouth fell open. I was just following policy," he stammered. "We have a certain standard." And Shaq shook his head. "That's not the standard we want. Our standard is genuine courtesy for every guest. It didn't matter if I was wearing a suit or a sweatshirt. If I were not an owner, but just an everyday customer, would you treat me differently?" Jason reddened, fumbling for words. The manager looked on, grim-faced. Then, the manager placed a gentle hand on Shaq's arm, addressing him quietly. "I'm sorry, sir. We'll address this immediately." Shaquille faced the staff who'd gathered nearby, all of them wide-eyed. This restaurant is about excellence. Yes, but also about respect. No matter how famous or unknown the guest, we treat them with dignity. If that's not happening, we fail. He turned to Jason. You saw me in casual clothes and assumed I wasn't worth your time. That's the opposite of what we stand for at Mirage. Jason stared at the floor, tears of embarrassment threatening. I truly regret this. Sir, he managed. I acted wrongly. I should have known better. Shaq read the shame in his eyes, took a breath, and replied in a quieter tone. If you're serious about changing, you'll show it by how you treat the next person who walks in here. Clothes and money don't define them or us. The tension in the restaurant dissolved into a hum of relieved conversation. Several guests who had watched the scene unfold broke into soft applause, nodding in admiration at Shaq's calm handling of the matter. Shaquille offered a faint smile to the manager. Otherwise, the meal was excellent. Please pass my compliments to the chef. He looked down at the final check, which Jason had returned to him. Shaq scribbled his signature, leaving a tip that was generous enough to remind the staff that kindness to customers could reap unexpected rewards. Then, with a polite wave, he turned and exited. The men in suits trailing behind his staff parted like a wave in reverential silence. Outside, city lights twinkled against the starless sky. Shaq took a measured breath. Another night. Another reminder that appearances often mean little. He stepped into his car, certain that tonight's lesson would echo within Mirage's walls. Humility is a more valuable currency than any expensive suit. And everyone, famous or not, deserves compassion.